So today, our teaching will be on chapter 1 of HaYesod. We went through the intro already, today we're going to be talking about how life works. And so I'll pray. Yeshua, we thank you for this time. We thank you that we can be here today, and we just bless your name for this Shabbat. And we praise you that you have given it to us to be able to honor your name and to glorify your name in this world, on this earth. And we thank you that people know you because we do what you say. So may we learn a little bit more of that today, and how we should think, that the way you would want us to think from a Hebrew and scriptural perspective. We praise you in Yeshua's name, amen. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. So most of you, again, this is somewhat something you've studied before, those who have done HaYesod. So you probably recognize the picture. Sorry. I just can't stand standing in one spot while I'm teaching. So that's why I like the wireless. So anyway, today's HaYesod. Of course, the date, and then understanding comes a little at a time. And most of us understand that. That's basic to any life. We don't know everything as soon as we're born or as soon as we come into a situation, whether it's school, whether it's building a house, whether it's what Andrew does when he has to go to a new house. He doesn't know exactly what it's going to be, but as he gets there, he figures out. He does have some previous information, so he's not walking in completely blind. And so I had some questions on here. Anyway, hope you can kind of like the picture there of the plant, how it starts as a seed and it becomes mature, and then of course from that plant you get other seeds. Okay. So do we have it all figured out immediately? Of course we don't. Does that mean we don't know anything? No. It just means you have to figure it out. Do we build a house in one day? Can you build a house in one day? No. Do you know everything your boss expects you to do for the rest of your time at your job? Of course not. If you're self-employed, do you might run into a different situation that you need to try and figure it out as you're going along, but you didn't know that before you got there. Those of us from Christian families who consistently attended Sunday church at one time, did we know all that we were to know about Christianity as we grew there the first time we went? And did Elohim create everything in a world in one 24-hour period? No, the reason I mentioned bringing this up, I know we've come out of that, but as you guys, as all of us, most of us, maybe I shouldn't say all of us, but most of us grew up in Christianity and the church. As we went, our understanding, it grew. So did our understanding of God. Now, that doesn't mean that it was all right. Therefore, it doesn't mean it was all true. But because of that, you can see that in every area of your life, regardless of whether you believe in God or not, you always grow in your understanding. So, but the difference here, what we're trying to understand in this situation, is how do I grow in my understanding looking from the scriptures from a Hebrew perspective. So that is the difference that we're trying to learn through HaYesod. And so how many days did God create the world over? 6 days, yeah. And the seventh day was a Shabbat, which is today, or as some of us learned a little bit today, the Ashkenazic would say Shabbos. And he did everything in a 24-hour time period. Now, I know there's some, those of you who have studied a little more know that there are those out there who claim to be Messianics and believe in a gap theory. What's that? No, Big Bang is a little bit different, Yokima. So, because of some verses that they say show that maybe the earth existed before and then all of a sudden something happened and it went into chaos. But that one is a little bit harder to prove, but I just want you to know that it is out there. So that's why I bring that up. And so we know that the first line, if we believe it to be true, then the rest is pretty elementary. If we, that doesn't mean that everything that God says is always literal. Sometimes, a lot of the times, he does use things he uses analogies. But when it comes to the creation, we see that he did create everything in 24-hour time periods. So before I go on to the next slide here, any other questions or comments? Okay, let's keep going. There we go. So here we go. So we're going to spend a little bit of our first time will be the first part of this will be on creation. Now, yes, Elohim clearly made the grass, herbs, and trees, and everything, with everything they needed, fully capable to reproduce immediately. For this first HaYesod chapter, I want us to focus on how it was to happen after Elohim finished his creating, which we find in Bereshit chapter 1, or Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 to 13, which talks about the vegetation specifically. And so that's why I had that picture of the plant growing, coming from a seed. And then I'll go back to it if it'll let. There we go. So there you go. I think Garrett missed it. I'm sure he's seen plenty of that. So, but we see that in the seed is everything that the plant needs. I'll go back there. The plant needs to grow. Okay, so as the water comes, as the soil's there, eventually it's eventually going to become a whatever it's supposed to be. In this, whether it's fruit, some kind of vegetable, a tree that you would plant here, some kind of herb or whatever, we see that it's all comes from that seed. And so I could use animals. Let me go back here. I know there's a lot of other we could use animals or humans, but again, I chose this one because also we realize that food, whether we're talking about food from the scriptures or food that we eat physically, the physical food that you put in your mouth, that you eat, we eat every day. We need it to survive. And that's how God created us. So I chose vegetation as they give life to all of creation and will for all eternity. Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 to 2 says that it talks about the tree of life. I'll quickly go back to Bereshit first here and just read that. So in chapter 1. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear," and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit, and his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielded fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and morning were the third day. So in there, before I go to read Revelation 22, we see that God had already made everything mature, and that the seed eventually would come from that. I know sometimes you ask the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, you can't have the egg if you don't have the chicken. But at the same time, the assumption is that you need the egg to have the chicken. And of course, how we see it, that's the case. But God already knew exactly how he was to form it. So God didn't need to have the egg first. He could create it exactly how he needed it to. And I, personally, that's how I believe it. That's the way that makes the most sense. He knew exactly how humans were supposed to look like before he gave us the ability to reproduce. He didn't go, "Oh, well, I hope this works out. I hope I know what I'm doing." It wasn't like that. Even we ourselves, as we make things, we create things, we already have an idea in our mind of how we want it to be. So even though we kind of learn as we go along, we already know, okay, this is what I want it to look like in the end. But as you're going along, some of those details you might figure out before you put it together exactly how you want it. But with God, he already had that figured out. But yet here we are showing God in what we create when we make things, whether we believe in him or not. I work for an IT company. We have a lot of engineers. They design different, not just programs, but they also design different what companies use on their rack to store the information. And every year, it's changing. The one we're most common with is cell phones. Every year, they change something in the cell phone. They might even change how the cell phone looks. Might get smaller or whatever. Might get a little bit, longer. But anyway, we see God. We see how man in that way shows the creation of God and how he learns as he goes along. So, if those, again, regardless of your belief in him, those of us who believe that he created, it's easier for us to see some of these truths. So let's go to Revelation 22, verses 1 to 2. And it says here, "And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and the Lamb. in the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. So again, inside, clearly we see inside of that tree that we're going to eat from one day is life, is what's going to help us, to heal us, to make us better. Even we know, and I'll talk about this more later, but even Yeshua himself refers to him as the tree. Okay, because of our belief in him. So, any of you worked on a garden, helped in a garden before? Maybe you have a garden. Yeah, there you go. What about farming? Anybody helped on a farm before? There you go. There you go. Yeah. Okay. And how about what do you need from the vegetation to keep from having to purchase a new one? Yeah, you just need the seed. It's a lot easier to transport a seed than to bring the whole tree home. Yeah. So, what is easier? Of course, I already answered that. So, number 3. Let's go on here. Oh, anything else? Any other comments or questions? Anybody else have anything they suggest as far as where you kind of grow in your learning? Yeah. Good soil. Anything else? All right, let's keep going here. So the seed contains all the information, which we already talked about, to produce and give life. As Elohim said in the beginning, we also know that seeds come from vegetation fully grown. Elohim in the beginning created all things mature with what they need to reproduce, which we already talked about. This can be seen clearly in all of God's creation. And we know that all of the first chapter of Bereshit talks about it, Genesis. And now I do want to, we talked about those other things first, but I want to go to letter C here, which says, are all seeds visible? No. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I do want to mention that when the seed has to go in the ground, as all of you know, before it can give life, before it can become what it's supposed to be. And so at that point, you don't see it for a little while. Now there's other, which I'll move to right away, there's other areas in our lives where we have a seed, but that seed, we can't see it until we act on it. It's the same with that seed in the ground. You don't see it, but then you see the fruit of it. And by fruit, we're not always talking about what you eat. It might just be, like that plant, like that tree. You're not going to necessarily cut down that tree and start eating it. Suppose you could if you were hungry and desperate, but generally we're not going to do that. So let's move on here. Okay, before we move on, where's some areas of your life that can be related to a seed that can't be seen? Okay, so all of us are, except for me, but I'm standing on the ground. Most of us are sitting on a chair or on the floor. So that you believe that chair is going to hold you. So that's kind of like a seed, but it's a different kind of seed because it's a seed in your mind that says, oh, I trust that this chair is strong enough to hold me, or I trust that this floor is not going to give way while I'm standing up here and walking. So let's go to Hebrews 11, verse 3. And it's interesting as we do that. Too bad we don't have another mic here, but that's okay. Hebrews 11. By faith, we understand. By faith, we understand to have been framed, the worlds by a word of God, so as not out of things appearing, things the seen to have come into being. That's from the King James Version. Yours might be a little bit different depending on the version you're reading from, but the idea is the same. So even though the Creator already knew what he wanted, he already saw it. We can't see it until we see the evidence of it. Now, so that's where our faith comes in at the beginning. So the question then is, when you guys are out, even today. So, for example, I was talking with a coworker, and we were going on the topic of the heavenly bodies, things like the stars, the galaxies, things like that. And he was talking a little bit about astrology and some people that he knows. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So he didn't know, but at the time, but what I explained to him was that in Romans, it talks about how they can see the Creator in the universe. And he shows himself to be who he said to be. But what people do is they push that aside because they don't want to believe in him. Or they replace him with another God that is becoming a reality. That's what they're really trying to push now, is something else created, so that way they can, because they realize that evolution just doesn't stand in any of their theories. It cannot be proven. So they are starting to push, well, some alien being maybe created us. They still don't want to believe that a loving person created them. They'd rather believe that an alien created them. But again, they have faith either in evolution, which we know takes more faith, because as we've been learning with Martin, and even before Martin, those of you who have studied it before, know it requires more faith to believe in evolution to be true than to believe that something created what we have today. Even they admit that. They don't teach it to the people below them because they need the students who are coming up to believe that evolution still works. So even if I'm at the top and I know it doesn't work, I want you below me to believe it. If it works, I don't want you to know. Unless you're getting to the point where you're the same level as me, then okay, then you'll know it. But then you don't tell, you might not, I don't want you telling some person at a certain level that we really don't believe this. So, there's the faith already. And so there's another area where we see faith, but we can't see it because they can't even prove it. For example, those of you who have heard of, he was in the Philippines one time with, if I remember, he was at a conference in the Philippines. Anyway, we went to his, Jordan and I used to correspond with him a little bit, and he talked about this guy, and this guy who used to, if he still does, anyway, this gentleman with the Smithsonian, he actually took a picture of him beside a femur of a dinosaur. Actually, it wasn't even a dinosaur. It wasn't a dinosaur. It was a femur. And it was like a human femur. and it was 6 feet. If I remember correctly, yeah, it was around 6 feet, just the femur. Okay, so this thing, you imagine your femur's essentially about just as tall as I am. Yeah, because I'm almost 6 feet. But what they would do when they would find these, they were actually told to destroy them. They would burn them because they didn't want people who believe in a creator to come and find them to prove that what they're saying isn't true. So you destroy the evidence, and you don't conveniently, only certain people know that you're destroying evidence. Nobody else is allowed to know about it. Because, again, it shows a creator to be true, not something came out of nothing. And so kind of answered the fourth one there, which was, oh, sorry, let me go on here. I didn't change it. Yeah, so there we go. I answered all those for you. When it comes to evolution, when it comes to believing in alien beings, we are able to see this a lot. And it is interesting if you note that in the Hebrew setting, they always go back to creation to prove God that they believe in to be true. They don't just go to some using these big fancy words that don't really have a physical meaning. They try and prove God based on what he has done. And therefore, what he says is true because he can do the same for us. And that's a little bit more of a scriptural or Hebrew way. I like to call it scriptural, so you use that sometimes because, again, I do believe that even the language itself and how people at that time thought, if God wanted people to think like we do, he would have had the scriptures done in a way that thinks like we do. But he intended that they would think like from an Eastern Semitic Hebrew way. Okay, he's not up there just he's not just like, oh, I hope this works. He doesn't. That's not who he is, and thankfully that's not the God that we serve. So let me go to the next one here. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So regarding faith as a seed. Now we're going to go to the life of David. And what's the one thing that God said about David? Most people know this. Yes, man after his own heart. Now, was David perfect? No. He committed adultery and murder. Those are like the two almost top of the list for the 10 words that you're not supposed to do. Right? And he did both of them. But because of his heart, God said of him, he's a man after his own heart. And that doesn't mean we should sin because we know that David, after he did that, his life changed. No, he wouldn't do it again. That's what we're trying to say. We all come from a fallen humanity. So, and chapter 19. Oh, sorry. What? Write it down. How come it's with my... I even memorize this one every day. What's going on? Okay, here we go. Okay. All right, here we go. So this is the one I wanted to go to, chapter 7. So if you can turn to chapter 7 of 2 Samuel. So I'll go ahead and just start reading here while you're looking it up. And it came to pass, when the king sat in his house, And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Lord, had given him rest round about from all his enemies, that the king said unto Nathan the prophet, See now, I dwell in an house of cedar, but the ark of God dwelleth within curtains. And Nathan said to the king, Go do all that is in thine heart, for Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is with thee. And it came to pass that night that the word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh came unto Nathan, saying, Go and tell my servant David, thus saith Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Shalt thou build me an house for me to dwell in, whereas I have not dwelt in any house since the time that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, even to this day, but have walked in a tent and in a tabernacle. In all the places wherever I have walked with all the children of Israel, I spake a word with any of the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to feed my people Israel, saying, Why build ye not me an house of cedar? No, therefore so shalt thou say unto my servant David, Thus saith Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh Zavaot, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. And I was with thee whithersoever thou wentest, and have cut off all thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. Moreover, I appoint a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more, neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more, as before time. Anyway, you guys, if you want to keep going on, you can, but another time. But I just wanted to say, again, we see this idea of being planted. So God, and we also see the idea of the house of a ruler. So again, we see here that faith is something that we grow as we go along. And, Luau, when my time's up, just let me know, because I didn't look when I started, so. Okay, sounds good. I think I should get done by that time. So we see that, we see the ruler. So David didn't know he was going to be given this opportunity to become where he was. He knew God called him to be the king, but he didn't know that he was going to destroy all these nations. He didn't know everything at the time that God had planned for him. So he showed his faith as he goes on. And we also see here that he wanted to build a house. Now, we know that he didn't build the house. Who built the house? Yeah, Solomon built the house. And but still, even the reason Solomon was able to build that house was because his father, David, had it in his heart. So again, we see another idea of the seed. And yet this time, that seed wouldn't be seen. Even David wouldn't see it. And we know there's another seed that David didn't see at that time. And we also see that God mentions that too. So he will plant them, and then he will build them in the land again in Israel. One day, we know more of them are going back now. One day they're going to be there for eternity. And we, who because of our faith are also part of Israel, we get to live there one day too with him. And we're going to have, I don't know where our land's going to be or all of that, but we're going to be there. And so did he see, maybe God had given him since he died, and now he's in heaven with Yeshua. Maybe he's able to see more now, but at the time he didn't know what everything was going to look like. He doesn't know how it's all going to come to pass, all the events. He didn't know any of that. But he trusted that one day, like God said, if you go on, it talks about that God will build him, and there'll be a seed of his that will reign for eternity. And so who's the seed that David has faith in? Of course, we know it's Yeshua. And so again, for those of you who are talking with people who want to believe, well, they didn't have the same faith as we did. Clearly, we see another one here. I've talked about others before, like Abraham. I've talked about Caleb. We see another one here, David. Abraham and David are mentioned in the book of Hebrews, and these people are mentioned, and they were. So remember that, okay, those of you who have conversations with people, especially Christians who believe that somehow we have more different faith than they do. That's not true. If they know their scriptures well enough, because God puts it in their heart to show them, they will see that many people before Yeshua came, before Jesus came, believed in him and even talked about him, even had details about him that hadn't happened yet. You know, the prophets are another example. They believed in what God told them, and God did tell them, some of them directly, some of them through visions. Okay, so there's no escaping that. But they still had to believe in what God was showing them to actually say it, to actually act upon it. And so we see faith in them. Now, it's interesting. If we go to where Solomon, when he builds after he finishes building the temple, he prays a prayer, and he starts with okay, here we go. And if you want to go, you can turn it if you like. It's 1 Kings chapter 8. Starting at I'll start at verse 55. And he stood and blessed all the congregation of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be the Lord that hath given rest unto his people Israel, according to all that he had promised. There hath not failed one word of all his good promise, which he promised by the hand of Moses his servant. The Lord our God be with us, as he was with our fathers. Let him not leave us nor forsake us, that he may incline our hearts unto him, to walk in all his ways, to keep his commandments and his statutes, and his judgments, which he commanded our fathers. And let these words wherewith I have made supplication before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh be nigh unto Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh our Elohim day and night, that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel at all times, as the matter shall require, that all the people of the earth may know that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is Elohim, and that there is none else. Let your heart therefore be perfect with Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh our Elohim, to walk in his statutes and to keep his commandments, as at this day. Now, we can see that, and there's even, okay, and I also want to read verse 25, which talks about his father David. Therefore now, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Elohim of Israel, keep with thy servant David my father, that thou promised him, saying, There shall not fail thee a man in my sight to sit on the throne of Israel, so that thy children take heed to their way, that they walk before me, as thou hast walked before me. So he talks about his father in that verse. So he completed what his father wasn't able to complete because of what, you know, and God, because David obviously had to destroy a lot of people, a lot of nations, so that they could have the peace that they had at that when Solomon was king. And because of that, he did have, understandably, had blood on his hands. And maybe that's one reason why God didn't believe that it does talk about that why God didn't allow him to build it. And his son would be. So here we see that fulfillment of what David was wanting to do and that Solomon would do. And we even know how that kind of came about, where David was about ready to die, and Bathsheba had to go in with Nathan and make sure that Solomon did become king, because
one of the other sons of David put himself as king at the time. And we already know that Solomon was the one that was to be chosen. So we see here too that, and we'll see this a little more as we go to the next point, but we see that what God says, he always does. And even if it's something in the physical that we might not think is important, to him, he still kept it for David. He believes that our bodies, even that we have now, are important to him. Otherwise, because he doesn't need a body to communicate with us. We could just be a spirit. But to him, clearly, he wanted us to have a body like Yeshua, who all in the form shows up as the physical and shows to us that our bodies that we have today are important to him. And one day, they will be made into a way that is without any corruption. And they won't be mortal, they'll be immortal. Like him, like the angels. So let's go with before we go on, any other ideas or comments on that one? Okay. So let me go to chapter 6. The next point. We'll go to John chapter 12, verse 24. Okay. So there's other ones I could have chosen as well, but I chose this one. And they kind of, you'll see them, they're a bit opposite of each other. But again, just to show that what we believe and we have faith in, it will happen if it's in the right heart and the right spirit. So let me finish looking at one time where Yeshua refers to a seed, dies and produces more seeds. John 12, verse 24. Okay. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat. Let's go back to that seed again. The beginning. Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. Now, in that context, he's also talking about his own death, because he knew he had to die for us. So he would be, as we know, he was in the ground for 3 days. It's an actual 3 24-hour time periods. I don't believe so, but that's another discussion. Anyway, so just like that seed, again, like we talked about earlier, that seed has to go into the ground to become what God intended it to become. Now, you guys, well, what do you mean? Yeshua wouldn't have become what he intended? Yeshua knew before he came what was going to happen. And so that's why, personally, I believe that it was when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane in Mount of Olives, it might have been even harder on him to go through and to even not believe in wanting it the easy way out. The reason I say that is because he at one time he had all this power, he had all this authority next to his Father. And because he had all this authority next to his Father, and he was in a human body like us, but he would also understand a little bit more of what that means, because he had to step down from who he was. So I believe in some ways it was even more difficult for him to be willing to go through for us what he did, through dying for us, through how they would kill him, how they would crucify him on the cross. He So when he's in the garden, how many of you have sweated drops of blood over stuff before because you just, it's so painful on you? We might have sweat, but to sweat drops of blood? I haven't heard of anybody. I know I haven't. I haven't heard of anybody being in that much grief because of something they know they have to do. So clearly, for whatever reason, it was a far more of a reality to him and far more painful on him because of where he came from and what he was giving up for us, and because his father would have to turn away from him. So, but we see that, what does he say? He says that not my will, but your will be done. So he had faith that God would do what he said. And now in the next one, so we see again that he had to do what he did for us. And then, so really, and a point I want to bring out before I move to the next one here is, if we look at where Paul talks about in Romans chapter 8, 30, he talks about, I'll just read it here, because, yes, it was the cross is very important. His life was very important. His ministry, very important. The cross, very important. Resurrection, very important. Ascension, absolutely important. But the most important part is that he is next to the Father as our high priest. If he doesn't ascend next to the Father, he can't be our high priest. We can't have salvation. He didn't finish why he came here in the first place. He didn't finish what he was supposed to do. So, Romans chapter 8, verse 30. Okay. Okay, verse 34. Who is he that condemns? It is Messiah that died, yea, rather that is risen again, who's even at the right hand of God, who also maketh intercession for us. Now, because he's as our high priest, he's now able to pray for us. And of course, we saw a little bit of that prayer that he's interceding for us on our behalf in Matthew 17. He does talk about a little bit. I'm not going to go there, but you can see it there. And that's what he's doing for us right now. So all these things that they're important, but he has to ascend and he has to intercede on our behalf. And we can't forget that. We can't, focus too much on that part, as important as it is. We got to remember that because of that, he went to the Father. Now, the last one is where it talks about, I'll just read, I have it written here. Anyways, it's Mark, it's verses 11, 12 to 14, and 20 to 24. I'm only going to read verses 14 and 22. And Yeshua answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And then verse 22. And his disciples heard it, and Yeshua answering saith unto them, Have faith in Elohim. Now, he's in this context, before he sees the tree, he's looking at it as Israel. And because Israel wasn't doing what they were intended to do, so he uses his tree as a context for Israel. But the other reason I bring that up is because he believed that when he told that tree that you will bear fruit no more forever, that it would happen. And it happened that way, because if you go on and read it the next day, so after he curses the fig tree, in the evening something else happens, and the next day they go and they see the fig tree again. And Peter remembers. They chose Peter again, but obviously they all saw the fig tree. But Peter remembered what Yeshua said the day before. And sorry. Yeah, I'm just about done. Thank you, Luan. And so, and then that's when Yeshua teaches them on having faith in Him. That if you believe, it will happen according to. And of course, we know in that context, he uses the word mountains. Now again, that's a bit of an analogy because it's saying that if there's something important, not necessarily a physical mountain, you might be able to move a physical mountain. I don't know. But he's talking about more important than that. He's talking about the spiritual reality. And that if you have faith, not only spiritually will things happen that you might not have thought could happen, but if you have faith in Him, it will happen. Same thing physically, but we see that physically through the fig tree, that the fig tree actually withered. The next day, Peter saw it. He goes, oh, look at that, what you said happened. No, it wasn't that they didn't see what he said happen, but for some reason, at this point, Yeshua talks to them on faith. So we see here, so let me go to the last one, and I'm done. Oh, sorry. I forgot it was there. There you go. We see then that our faith believes in what we have asked for of Elohim, waiting to see the fruit of our belief. The fruit eventually will appear, causing our faith to grow, just as a seed is planted, grows, and bears more fruit. We then need to see that our understanding of who we are in Messiah grows as we learn to both think and act as He did. We are learning more of what HaYesod is supposed to help us become. Okay, that's it.
Amen. All right. So at this point, I believe that you have understand that the purpose of us going through the HaYesod is the HaYesod, meaning to say our foundation. So if we go back to Brother Wesley's presentation, it always starts with a seed, right? It is a process. So as the seed is sown to the ground, it matures evidently. But it doesn't mean that when the seed is there, it matures as fast as it could be. It goes into a process. So that is also how we understand our faith. We don't get everything immediately. So we get to understand that it begins with a seed, and then eventually it will grow. It's a process that we go through. And of course, as believers, that is how we understand also our faith is. So that is in connection. Our faith started with the seed of us, Yeshua, in our hearts. And Brother Wesley was talking about it, about that faith, just like the process of growth, it starts with the seed. So understanding comes also in time. Even our redemption plan, how the Lord saves us, how we understand the redemption process or redemption plan of God, it starts with a process. So the process of the teaching of the Lord in understanding all of the teachings comes also in a process, right? So thank you, Brother Wesley. Do you have any other